So, welcome to another happiness show. Let me give you a quick intro. Let me get that timer started. There we go. There we go. So, let me give you a quick intro as to what's happening, how this show works. Happens every Thursday, 7 to 8 p.m. UK time. Today, we're going to be talking. Well, generally, I talk about all sorts of things that affect our lives. Anything to do with life affects our happiness, and that includes things that go all the way from personal to global issues. The first half of the show will be about mistakes. How do you manage mistakes in our lives? Second half is about everything to do with life. You can ask any questions you want. It's a super interactive show. I'm really interested in what you've got to say. Um, Previous shows are at bigquestionsanswered.com. My friend or my uncle Hassan is here, and all the things I'll be talking about from Islam. Why Islam? Because it's inclusive, it's scientific, it's comprehensive, and I managed to get through all of that in good time for you. So let me post the first bit. I like to break this down into three parts. So here we go. Where's my, there it is. Paste it in there. First bit is about hope. Um, and so let me put it as a question so we know what we're talking about. Hope is, the question is, I keep making bad mistakes in my life. What hope do I have? And the brief answer that I'm going to explain is there is beauty in the hopeless journey towards redemption. I do try to use small words. So redemption is like, um, fixing the bad things you do, right? And so I'm gonna be a bit unusual. Normally I give really short quotes that I can actually post on the screen. This time I'm gonna do a little bit of story time. Here we go. Um, this is from a little story that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, and it goes like this: There was a man who heartlessly murdered 99 people. Then he felt remorse. He went to a learned man and told him about his past, explaining that he wished to repent, reform, and become a better person. I wonder if Allah, that is God, will pardon me, he asked. For all his learning, the scholar was a man who had not been able to digest what he had learnt. You will not be pardoned, he said. Then I might as well kill you too, said the other, the murderer, that is, and kill him he did. He then found another worthy individual and told him that he had killed 100 people. I wonder, he said, whether Allah will pardon me if I repent. Being a truly wise man, he replied, Of course you will be pardoned. Repent at once. I have just one piece of advice for you. Avoid the company of wicked people and mix with good people, for bad company leads one into sin. The man expressed his repentance and regret, weeping as and sincerely asked his Lord to forgive him. Then, turning his back on bad company, he set off to find a neighborhood where the righteous people lived. On the way, his appointed hour arrived, that is, he died, and he died. The angels of punishment and of mercy both came to take away his soul. The angels of punishment said, That is a sinful person, he rightfully belonged to them. But the angel of mercy also claimed him, saying he repented and had resolved to become a good man. He was on his way to a place where righteous people live, but his appointed hour had come. A great debate ensued, and Gabriel, that's one of the angels, was sent as an arbiter to settle this affair. He was sent as a judge. After hearing both sides, he gave his judgment. Measure the ground. If the spot where he died is closer to the good people, then he belonged to the angels of mercy. But if he is nearer to the wicked people, he will be given to the angels of punishment. They measured the ground because the man had just set out, he was still closer to the wicked, but because he was sincere in his repentance, the Lord, that is God, moved the spot where he lay and brought it just outside the city of the good people. The penitent servant, that is, this ex murderer, was handed over to the angels of Mary or Mercy. I imagine both. Um, so let me just briefly, I know I've taken a lot of time already, but let me briefly say what I think of this story. This story is not about faith, not just about faith in a kind God, although God is the only objective anchor for hope. Um, and I could go into that's a bit complicated. God is the only solution to nihilism, I would say. But it is also about making a stand in a seemingly hopeless fight against the evil within yourself. It is because it is seemingly hopeless that attempting to do the right thing becomes so beautiful. God tells us he is happier with someone for being sorry for a mistake they have made than a person who finds a camel they have lost in the desert. So if you've lost your camel in the desert, you're basically in big trouble, and you'll be pretty happy when you get that camel, because that camel is your ride out of the desert and your water supply. Anyway, I've talked a lot. Any thoughts, Uncle?
Yeah, your story is more of a narrative to explain uh, the inner goings of a human brain and thinking, right? It's not the physicality of the actuality of what's happened. For me, immediately what comes to mind is the verse of the Quran when the opponents of the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, they demanded of him that if he is truthful, to go to the heavens and bring down a book, right? They say, you bring the book from there. We don't believe in this Quran. You go into the heavens, bring a physical book from down up above, and we'll believe you, right? And what was the response given to him, to them, to their opponent? The Holy Prophet said, but I am only a human being. If Allah had so willed, he would have made angels prophets. Now, who are angels? And you've touched on your talk that angels are those who submit without questioning. And the story of about Iblis, when he questions God,
So
Allah
Iblis
says,
is sort of a man
well,
who
I was
followed
going to,
Satan.
well, let
Okay,
me
you were going
explain.
to
Yeah,
say, you're
I was
going
going to
to go
explain
on.
that, right?
Yeah,
So that narrative actually is an explanation for our own thinking. It's not the actuality of a physical thing. That's how it happened, but it's our mind can comprehend what happens. Okay,
yes.
or why
Yeah,
we. In fact, it's the
metaphor.
story of the purpose of creation.
Hmm.
So Iblis says, "I'm not going to obey you to this creation that you are creating. I am bigger than that. I am made of fire." And this, and Allah says, all the angels submitted, but not Iblis. Right now, angels' quality is to obey and to do what's commanded, so they can't do wrong. But Iblis is that inner quality of human. This is what God is trying to explain, that He's creating this man that has Iblis in him. Okay, what is that Iblis? That Iblis is the questioning thought. It's the one that says to you, do this or do that. Which one shall I do? One will take you towards the angel's way, and one will take you towards the Iblis way. So, in the DNA that we are created with, we are destined to make a mistake. We are
Yeah.
destined to make a mistake. And in the worldly affairs, we hear this often, that you learn from your mistakes. In fact, the progression of human beings has been through error,
Yeah.
through making those mistakes, to do those dangerous things that they shouldn't have done. When that Iblis got the better of that individual to make that mistake. How was penicillin made? It was made through a mistake,
Yeah.
right? And those who are with it and who might be, bringing more modern, even Viagra was created through an error, but because they were trying to look for something else, and out came Viagra, right?
Okay.
So, yeah,
Interesting.
so human nature or humankind has been created to make that mistake or to do things that it might not evaluate what is right and what's wrong. Now, if you look at the animal kingdom, when a lion kills an animal, a deer or a Bambi, let's say, a baby of another animal, does it think to itself, what are the consequences when I kill that animal? It doesn't. All he's concerned about is filling his belly, because that is what that animal has been created to do. But man is created differently to animal kind, and man is destined to make mistakes. So therefore, the DNA of humankind is to make mistakes. So if someone says I keep making bad mistakes, it's probably a positive, for
Yeah,
me.
as long as we make an attempt to
Rectify,
change that.
to rectify.
And that's
Yes.
right. And not give up, though. That's
No.
not good either.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
But that is the very purpose. This is what, for me, when I read Surah Baqarah and read about Iblis and the angels submitting, this is what I see. I don't see
Yeah.
a physical thing that happened. It is what God created in us to
Yeah.
explain to us what Iblis is, what is this thing inside us. Every human being has Iblis in him. And this
Yeah.
is why the Holy Prophet, when asked, have you got Iblis, Satan in you? And he said, my Satan has become Muslim. What does
Yeah.
that mean? It
Smitten. Yeah.
means that I have no longer that desire to make a mistake. I think your
Cool.
time is up.
Yep. Okay. I might
Yeah.
have to paste it again. There we go. Let's paste it
Uh,
again. Okay, here we go.
yeah.
So, yeah, so that was cool. Mistakes aren't the end of the world as long as you make, there's hope if you keep moving forwards.
Mhm.
So the
But
next bit is,
for that, you need guidance, right?
yeah,
You need help and you need support, not necessarily from prophets, but from all sorts of sources, whatever the situation is.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
I don't. I restricted myself because you got another topic, so
Yeah,
we
I
don't
know,
want
I
to
know.
delve
I
into it.
appreciate you control. So the next bit is peace, right?
Hmm.
I've called it peace, right? So should we have regret? So a lot of people suffer from a real lack of peace in their lives, like being at peace with yourself. Okay,
Hmm.
and my brief answer would be yes, you should have regrets because regrets are helpful. Okay, it's kind of like a natural mechanism within ourselves, right? Okay, if you make a mistake, you hurt your knee, it bleeds. You go, oh, better react to that. But there are 4 habits that you can develop to avoid regret, to have a sense of peace. So let's go into that. Hopefully, I won't skip to the wrong. Oh, you know what?
Hmm.
Oh, God. Made my first mistake. Yay. Heroes. I missed the middle bit. Okay, I'm going to try to. Maybe I want to keep it in order because I've already put on a timeline in my chapter section. So I'm going to reintroduce that. Here we go. So people who are watching probably
See, you
might be
made a
confused.
mistake.
Yeah, there we go. Made a
You were
mistake. There we
you were
go.
destined to make that
I'm
mistake,
trying to. Oh,
right?
exactly.
And you recognized it. You recognized it, and you're trying to rectify it. That is human nature.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Thank you. Okay, so and I've made another tiny mistake, which is I wanted to write heroes. I'm just going to copy that because it makes it easier to focus as well. Okay, I like that little title as well. So let me stick that on the top.
I love your plan on this, by the way. It's very good. You
Cool. I
must sit down
appreciate
and show me what you do.
it. Okay, so heroes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of like the subtitle of this little section.
Hmm.
7 minutes. Why can't I just accept myself for who I am with all my flaws? There's a lot of common thing about you hear in the social media. Just accept yourself for who you are, right? And my answer would be, you will not. You will not accept yourself, or if you give up. But if you stand up after every fall, you will love yourself. Okay. And I'm going to quickly, so I didn't post the quote last time because it was way too long, because it was a long story. But normally I do. So let me do that. And I try to stick to the Quran, the Holy Quran. Let me stick that on the screen. Here we go. It says, I, that is God, honor the self accusing soul and make it a proof that the day of judgment is a certainty. So that's the Holy Quran, chapter 75, verse 3. And so some people might have not seen quite that translation. What I do is I take the commentary explanation and try to feed it
Hmm.
into a sort of short version of the translation, because Arabic is incredibly deep. It's actually very hard to bring it down to something succinct in English. But anyway, and my brief sort of comment on that, because it is deep, it's a bit like poetry, you kind of have to think about it. But Let me start explaining why I've sort of written hero at the top. So a hero is not a person who is perfect and can't make a mistake. A hero is someone who falls, then gets up to make himself and the world a little better. In the verse just mentioned, God honors such a being who attempts that heroic struggle. You might think that it is pathetically low standard for God to value, just somebody who's just trying in spite of being pathetic, but there is nothing you can do that is great compared to what God can do. Your greatness comes from the greatness of your heart, which develops every time you listen to the quiet calls of your conscience to make the right choices. So that's what the self-accusing soul is, your conscience. Any thoughts?
Yes, it touches on what I was saying actually earlier. It's you assess for yourself, and when you do make a mistake and, and you regret it, that in itself is a recognition of your mistake. Without regret, there is no recognition. So you have to regret in order to advance. But the question is that, like you were saying, that you hear this a lot. Why can't you accept me for who I am? But who are you? That's the question. Who are you? Are you the person? Am I the person, for example, who back in the 1970s when I came to this country, is that the person who, when was given racist abuse, accepted it and took it on the chin? Or am I the person who today, when someone raises a racist issue, I challenge it? Right? So if I was to remain what I was in the 70s as everyone else, then racism would exist. People would not challenge it, people would not want to stop it. And what that would lead to ultimately would be subjugation of a people. So if you don't change, you become subjugated yourself, in my view.
Hmm.
So change has to come from within. So you have to stand up and not just accept yourself for who you are, but you want to become a person better than what you are. You were saying to me earlier that you're always learning, you're always doing something. This is what human nature is. And this is what that story about Iblis is about. That
Hmm.
man is there to make choices and to make rectifications of the mistakes he's made. If there was no rectification, if there was no repentance, then what would have been the purpose for us? Just to make a mistake and that's it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Pointless. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it would have been a pointless form of existence. So the very existence that we make a choice and we make and we regret and we change and we bring about change is what the purpose of creation is.
It's like a continuous uphill struggle, which
Indeed.
is beautiful
Indeed.
in itself. Just the idea,
Absolutely.
I think,
Yeah. And I
and
think does
yeah,
that reflect a little bit on what the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said
yeah,
that uh, a Muslim man and a Muslim woman is one who continually seeks knowledge.
yeah,
From the day they're born to the day they die, they have to keep seeking knowledge. Seeking knowledge never ceases.
yeah.
Right? So even at old age, there is still knowledge to be gained, maybe in retrospective different to what you were earlier in your youth, but still nevertheless more knowledge to be had.
Hmm. So yeah, I want to break down some of the thought. You know what? Yeah. So I'll break down one of the ideas. I'm not sure how clear they are sometimes, which is the idea that it's not that others don't accept you, because we have a problem with other people accepting us for who we are, but I
Mhm.
think that's missing the point. You won't accept yourself, and I want to
Yes.
explain that as not just a faith-based idea, because nothing I said in my introduction, this is all scientific, logical. We know from our own experience, when we do bad things, we have this phrase in English: how do you sleep at night? Right?
Mm.
That means, like, when you do something wrong, how do you
Yeah.
sleep at night?
Yeah.
We know anything we do will bite us in the back. We can't escape ourselves. If the law doesn't see us, doesn't matter,
Mm.
we see ourselves. There's an amazing thing called a conscience, and it has the same what the most amazing thing about it is that it's the same set of rules that we all have implanted in our heads.
Hmm.
And that's just fantastic. It tells you something about why we're here, that there's this judgment going on. It's a set of rules, and they're all telling us to do the same thing, which is fantastic, which is why this verse also says this is evidence of the day of judgment, that at
Yeah.
the end of this life, there's going to be a proper reckoning. We kind of get away with a lot in terms of the law here,
Mm.
but there's a reckoning that we can't get away with. Any
Well,
last thoughts about
yeah,
it?
that verse, the self-accusing soul, what is that? That verse is saying that when you do something wrong, you know it in yourself, and that is what Allah will ask you to account for. That what you knew within yourself is what you are answerable for the hereafter. So when we go into the next world with the soul and not with our physical bodies, that soul will be the one that will be laid out in bare to be answerable to for our deeds, and that's what will be judged upon. So, and that conscience remains with us on earth, because even the biggest of criminals, sometimes when they're in prison, come out and reveal to others what they have done, because they can't live with them. So like you said, they can't, how do you sleep, just how do you sleep at night, with that thought. These people, whatever way you look at it, ultimately something inside their soul says to them, I must admit to this, otherwise my life is purposeless."
Yeah. When you say things, I feel like saying even more things, but I'm going to move
I
on to
know,
the
I
next thing.
know.
It's
I
like
know.
just so true. Just so you know, there's a ton of stuff we're not saying
Mm,
that I've aimed in my lesson. So do go to the description below, where there's lots more material that I wanted to discuss, but there's never enough time. I always write too much material for a show.
mm,
So anyway, so next bit, the next part of dealing with, you know, mistakes and things is,
mm.
how do you find like constant peace? The idea of like, you don't want to always just be making mistakes and having a life of regret. I mean, you make mistakes, but anyway, let me put it as I put it here. Should we have regrets? And the answer is yes. I've said this before, isn't it, a minute ago? But regret is helpful, but there are 4 habits that you can develop to avoid regret. Okay, so let me just paste them here. So they'll probably fit in to one of the comments. Let's see if we can do it. So paste it there. Wonder how it'll look. Yeah, so anyway, so it goes, there's and I've numbered them. This is actually verse 2, and I haven't listed the whole thing, but anyway, I tell you with certainty that there will be a time when time itself will seem to be flying by. Verse 3,
Like they should.
in exactly, yeah. In such a time, most people will feel lost. Number 4, accept those who believe in the teachings of Islam, that is, those who do good, and uh, those who teach the truth, and who steadily stay on this path by never letting themselves get too emotional, neither too excited or too sad. It's quite a kind of throwing in what I'd call a commentary on this particular chapter of the Holy Quran, uh, known as Al Asr, or by the time, chapter 103, verse 2 to 4. And very briefly, what is this saying? Why don't so we don't really want to stop making mistakes.
Mm,
It's only human. Okay. What we suffer from is not knowing our way in life. Deep down, we search for fulfillment through some cause that evades most of us. So we want fulfillment, we don't know how, right? The pain we feel from getting lost is actually the distance we feel from not achieving the goal we were born for.
mm,
The 4 qualities needed to stay away from feeling lost and regretful are: 1, believing in God, and I'm going to explain why in a minute, but just quick summary of what I just read in the verse. Number 2, doing good. Number 3, spreading the truth. And number 4, do it all patiently. So, number 1, why do we need to believe in God? God is the source of all meaning, without which we drift into nihilism. So nihilism is this kind of idea that there is no meaning, it's all random and things like that. So We need meaning to have direction in life and so not feel lost. So it's quite deep stuff. We could probably discuss it a little bit. Number two, the direction God has chosen for us is to be good as defined by God. So even what is good and bad is quite complicated, but so that's why we need that. But as I say, this is based on something you can reflect on yourself. So I'll try to get through this very quickly, but we want to be good. If we're not good, as I talked about, this our conscience will kick us in the butt. It's the short version, right? So we need to be good. So that's kind of like a self-evident truth, and that's what these verses are speaking of. So what else was I going to say? The definition of good and bad are programmed into us. If we stray from those definitions, we feel unhappy. So we can reflect that religion tells us one thing. If we don't do it, we will test and we will find that we're not happy. Number three, a key part of being good is to tell it. A key part of being good is being good to others, and a key part of that is spreading the truth. What is the truth? The rules that give us inner peace. And number four, doing good deeds and spreading the truth is all about making the world better, which is inevitably going to lead to confrontation with those who prefer darkness. To enjoy this journey, you have to keep a long-term view and stay calm, as too much excitement or sadness makes us feel off, takes us off our balance. Long intro. Did you understand any of that? I clearly need to break down tons of stuff, but
Yeah.
like, where would you like to start on that?
Well,
Any particular
you
part?
started a question about God and what is God, and if I turn it around and say if there is no God, then what is stopping me to do whatever I want to do on this earth?
Yeah.
Right? Why can't I commit all sorts of crimes? Why can't I be a terrible husband and a terrible father or a terrible employee if I have no accountability?
Mm,
Right? And so God is that uh, that being that gives us a compass to the direction we need to follow.
yeah.
And if you remember, in most of our Ahmadi mosques, there's a verse that is often printed in a lot of our mosques nowadays. It's a wonderful verse. The Arabic is Allah bi zikrillahi tatmain in nul qulub, right? And it is in the remembrance of Allah that the heart finds contentment. Now, uh, what that verse is saying that what truth gives us is inner peace. Is I think ultimately your whole topic is this is about happiness and peace, and what it gives us is inner peace. And Allah is saying that to find ultimate peace, you have to have God in your heart. So this is where, if you don't believe in a God, then you're open and free to do anything you want without facing any consequences of what happens afterwards. It's
Yeah.
just like a lion.
So there's two sort of or couple of elements to this, right?
Mm,
Which people are finding. So England left Christianity about 100 years ago and done this, what I would call this materialistic experiment. And it's like, we want to do whatever we want.
mm.
And the result we're finding out after 100 years is massive depression.
Uh,
And all over the West,
Social breakdowns,
social breakdowns,
right?
so social problems and internal problems,
Yeah,
outside ourselves and
yeah,
inside ourselves,
yeah,
massive mental health problems, mental and
yeah.
relationships problems, endless, right? Okay. And it
Because what
doesn't
you're
mean
doing
anything
is
without
doing
God.
things
Yeah.
on your whim rather than having accountability of what you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's this thing that, like, the one thing I want to point out, it's not just that we have to. I think there is value in fear of judgment, okay, like that God is watching us. But there is something else that we've found in this materialist experiment, is that when we can do anything we want, we don't have this sense of purpose. And psychologists are telling us, there's a Viktor Frankl, who's a famous guy for psychologist, for writing a book, Man's Search for Meaning. So without meaning, without purpose, we are miserable. We absolutely need it. It's fundamental to happiness. So when we don't have that, when we don't have some sort of anchor, which is God, that
Mm.
gives meaning
Mm.
and purpose and everything to what we do, we're in massive trouble. So
Yeah.
we can think that freedom is all we want, but we don't want freedom. We don't want freedom. We want something to do and be
We,
excited about
yeah, we need freedom
in
with
life.
rules. We need freedom with rules.
Yeah,
I
more
remember.
balanced answer. Yeah, yeah. We
I
need some
remember.
freedom. Yeah,
I remember when Salman Rushdie wrote the book.
the
I forgot the
satanic
book.
verses.
The
Yeah,
Satanic Verses, right?
yeah.
And I actually wrote a letter because, oh yeah, at the time, one of the newspapers, or many of the newspapers, sorry, I'll take half a minute on this.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, go on.
Okay. One of the newspapers printed a report from Iran that Iran had issued a fatwa against
Salman
against
Rushdie.
Salman
Yeah,
Rushdie, right? And
yeah.
so I wrote a letter that number one, which they never quoted any verses where this fatwa came from, neither the paper nor the Ayatollah, and number two, that is what Islam requires of us is dignity for others, respect for others, right? And just like in the House of Commons, you are not allowed to call others liars or abusive terminologies. If you do, you are kicked out of the House of Commons. Islam teaches us that to be with others as well. So Salman Rushdie's book was offensive to Muslims, and therefore there are consequences, whether it's right or wrong, but there will be consequences because it hurts people's feelings. And when you hurt people's feelings, there are consequences. So there must be rules. If you don't have rules, this is what happens.
Yeah, you don't go around the streets cussing everybody's mum. Like you
Mm.
just walk past somebody. It's just a bit weird. But I think that's a whole different interesting question by itself. But like, where do your freedoms end and my
Yeah,
rights begin, and
yeah,
all this kind of stuff,
yeah.
which is very interesting. But
Mm.
anyway, so as I want to keep repeating, I posted like the question and some stuff I'm going to say, but I want to keep repeating. It's supposed to be a live show. Feel free to ask questions. If you're just enjoying and listening, that's great as well. But you can even post questions after the show in the non-live comments. I'm always looking at them anyway, and I even answer them, and then I'll like type an answer as well as
Mm.
answer it in the next show. So anyway, if you aim at nothing, you hit nothing is a quote I got from a movie. Does Islam have better advice? And I'm just going to I'm just going to do because I like to start with a verse of the Holy Quran, and then we can say whatever. I have this is a verse that says, I have not created, that is, God has not created powerful people and normal people other than they should be at one with me. So that's my translation of this word called, it's an Arabic word called ibadah, often translated simply as worship, but way too simple, which means keep God as your focus and do good things. That's Holy Quran chapter 51, chapter 51 verse 57. Again, go to the material in the description below, and all the quotes there, you can link to it, whatever. But what has that got to do with anything? So I think, yes, you got to aim at something, right? Otherwise you're going randomly. In fact, other people find something to do with you if you don't have something you're going to plan for your life, right? But that's not enough. Like, aim at what, and how do you find what to aim at? Okay, now you've been designed, and if you follow that design, you will find the most fulfilling thing you can possibly do. That's my my claim. Okay, and the way you can test the claim is try that thing. So what is that thing? So God, through the Holy Quran and all the other previous scriptures, but they're not exactly, not they've been tampered, so we just stick with the Holy Quran. Okay, so that's a whole another debate of like, how do we know they're tampered? But anyway, so in the Holy Quran you got a whole bunch of instructions, like be kind to your neighbor, and you'll find if you're kind to your neighbor, I'll just stick with that one thing so my friend or uncle Asan can have a go. If you're kind to your neighbor, you're actually the one who's going to benefit. These are the kind. So God doesn't, in short, God doesn't need anything really from you. By listening to God, you're just doing things that are beneficial to you. and those are in line with the trajectory of your ultimate purpose to become a beautiful being. That is what it means to be at one with God. Vaguely, any thoughts?
Yeah. If you aim at nothing, you hit nothing. What that's really saying is another way of saying that there's a purpose of what we do, right? So, what is that purpose? The purpose is that we are created for a reason. We are not just being put here arbitrarily, right? It's a little. You're a school teacher, am I correct, Alan?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
a private tutor at the
Okay.
moment, but
Okay.
yeah, but
That's
same.
fine.
I teach.
Now,
Yeah.
what is your job? Your job is to help kids achieve something better than if they don't come to you, right? Above and beyond. Now, if the purpose of that education was that something good will come out of it, that education has a purpose. If it was a case that in a classroom of 30 kids, right, there are some who are going to be intellectually very good and some of them are going to be intellectually challenging, right? And the ones who are intellectually good will achieve things because they will pass their exams, they will go from school to university and beyond, right? Those who don't won't achieve those goals, right? So, but if at the end of the year the exam results, irrespective, meant that the ones who didn't put the effort in could still become a brain surgeon or a politician or whatever, and while the others who worked hard lose out just only because of arbitrarily you've been given position irrespective of what you put in, then the whole purpose of education would fail. So the purpose of education is for you to achieve things. And if you don't achieve it, you fail. The purpose of this creation is that we are here for a purpose. And if we achieve that, and you were saying one of those key goals is to be good, right?
Mm,
And this is what religion does. This is what the prophets came to do. This is what Allah's angels have come to put in our thoughts and minds to do good. And it is human nature that when we do good, we feel good for it.
yes. Yeah.
Whenever I've donated money to a charity or me and my wife do some homeless feeding, right? We feel good doing it, not just
Yeah.
because not because it's good for us, but it gives goodness to others, right? So
Yeah.
we are inherently DNA'd to do good to others.
To do good.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
we like being good. Even
yeah.
Hitler
So,
wanted
so the
to.
purpose, so
Yeah.
there has to be a purpose of what we are here. If there is no purpose, going back to the question, then then all the goodness that we do has no purpose at all. And it'll be like going back to that school where everyone doesn't bother revising for the exam and they equally become brain surgeons or doctors and solicitors without having passed any exams.
Mm,
It's got to be a goal and you've got to drive towards that, and you have to be
yeah.
driven and you have to make the effort to achieve it. It can't be achieved through effortless,
Yeah.
no effort.
Yeah.
And
We
this is what
we
we are here.
like that effort, don't we?
Yeah.
We don't
And
want
so
to be just.
your
Yeah.
question earlier about making mistakes is part of that, making the effort to
Yeah.
come and overcome those
So
mistakes.
I really appreciate Peter File posting a little question. What if we don't have a neighbor? So I mentioned like part of yeah. So I mean that's kind of funny, but at the same time, I appreciate the question. And so often we go, what if we can't do this and what if we can't do that? But that's kind of not the point. I mentioned earlier that to what we want to do, what we need to do to be fulfilled, and the aim that we really want is to be good. And what is part of being good is being kind to your neighbor, for example. That's what Peter's kind of referring to, I think, right? So, firstly, in Islam, we've got a really interesting definition of what is a neighbor. So, there's all sorts of definitions, but it includes people who you're working with, for example. So it's not just neighbors, but even like in terms of community, in terms of where your house is, there's 40 houses to your right. And so if the first house to your right is a mile away, that's your neighbor. And there's
Mm.
40 to your right, 40 to your left, 40 in front of you, and 40 behind you. So basically, your local community. And the
Yes.
idea is not to make excuses about, like, I'm not really saying you're making excuses, but I think sometimes we see religion as a bunch of annoying rules, people who don't understand religion. Actually, they're rules to help you, so you try to go out your way to find these neighbors of these different definitions, because you're the one who's going to benefit, because we're social beings. For example, we need to do that instead of getting stuck in front of Netflix. I'll give you a few seconds, to
I
say
was going to say
something.
a neighbor for me is more than just that. It is anyone who needs help,
Yeah.
anyone who's in need. He's a neighbor. Doesn't matter where he is, whether he's next door, whether he's in the next town, or whether he's in the next country. It's anyone who you can give help to overcome their situation.
So I'm typing this one out because one of the weaknesses of this, okay, I'm misspelling as well,
That's
is that
easy.
I can't copy paste, which is a bit weird of this system. Anyway, how do we know that we're in? I'm gonna put it on the screen. You know what? Let's just be lazy. Just stick it on the screen. All right, here we go. Okay, so I'm sure that's big enough. Hopefully, okay. Let's get rid of that one.
It is. It
So
is.
how do we know that we're in the correct religion if you suffer in every religion? Um, so that's a great question. I'm trying to think of a verse or a saying of Prophet Muhammad that relates to that. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is, this day I perfected your
Your
religion
religion
for you.
and named it, called it Islam.
Islam. And Islam is not just a random name. So you
Yeah.
have like different religions, like Buddhism named after the teacher of that particular religion, Buddha, instead of Christianity from Christ, i.e. Jesus, and things like that. Islam is a very descriptive religion. The name is descriptive of how to achieve
Mm.
the. It's got a two-sided, and hopefully you'll answer this question. It's Arabic is amazing. It's a in the sense that Islam has two meanings. One is it's to achieve peace, it's inner peace and outer peace and all sorts of peace, right? And the other meaning is to submit your will to God, like get rid of that silly ego that's making you do stupid things,
Mm.
is another way of saying it, right? And if you get rid of that silly ego, what happens is you achieve peace.
Peace.
So
Yeah.
it's an amazing,
Yeah.
amazing one word
Yeah.
can do that, right? So how do we know you're in the correct religion? One answer is it's the one that makes you happy. If you want to have peace or happiness, I think so. So people in English, we struggle with this word of happiness, right? Because happiness can mean short-term happiness. I'm talking about peace, which is the ultimate version of happiness. Okay, and so Islam says you do this and you'll get that. You listen to these bunch of instructions, you'll get that peace. And the short version is submit your ego, which is telling you to do stupid things. Let go of that ego, and you start following the truth really easily, and the truth will be really apparent. So I could go on about it, but I kind of like should give you a chance, Uncle
Sure.
Hassan. So
Yeah. Thank you. I love that question, and it's a question I often get confronted, and I have a vision on it. First of all, let's go let's go to the word of Quran. Let's go to religion first. What religion? And you correctly interpreted the meaning of the word Islam. It is not the group called Muslims that is Islam. It is God's message to us that is Islam. And that is why Islam requires of us to believe in all the previous prophets, because they all brought Islam to the world. So
yeah,
when it is referred to Islam, it is referring to that Islam, the message of God, not just the message of Prophet Muhammad. But let me come to that
peace
in a
be upon
second,
you.
right? So that is what Islam is. Now, how do we achieve it? The Holy Quran says, "O ye who believe, the Christians, the Jews, and the Sabians, believe in God and do good deeds, and your abode is paradise." Okay, so God is addressing everyone here. He's not addressing just Muslims. It's addressing everyone, and it says, do what? The very thing you explained what Islam means: submit to God, and out of that comes the goodness that you do to others. Okay, and this is the topic we're talking now. An analogy that I often use about this is, people will then say, because I know some people claim, some Muslims claim that a Christian and a Jew is a kafir, non-believer, when Islam doesn't call them that, and so on and so forth. So the analogy that I often give is that the road to God are many, right? Now, if I was to say to you, Khalid, and to say to Khalud, who's asked the question, let us all meet. Uh, I know this wonderful place in Leicester. Okay, I'll just choose Leicester at random. Okay, so all of us will take our means of communication. I've sent you the address, and someone will take a sat nav. Someone who might not have a sat nav will take the internet and take the maps off there. And an old fogey like me, let's say, for example, let's say if my father was alive and I told my dad, look, we're going to meet there, he would have brought his atlas map, right? His atlas to use the map. All of us would have got there, right? But who would have got there the quickest or the best way? The one with the sat nav, right? But if I give the sat nav to my father, he might not have got there because he doesn't know how to use the sat nav, right? So what suits him was the atlas, and he's comfortable with the atlas. So if your religion is making you do good, then what need for me to try to convert you? Because Allah in this verse is saying that addressing Christians, Jews, and Sabians. Sabians are those people who believed in a one God. So anyone who believes in the singularity of God, addressing those that if you do these good deeds and you believe in Allah, right, you will go to heaven, whether you turn to Islam or not. Because it would be wrong for me to force my dad to use the sat nav because he's not comfortable with it. Right?
I love the metaphors. There's some good metaphors there. Wow. Okay. And
But
what
does
your
that make the
answer?
point I'm
Yeah.
making? That
Yeah.
that if Christianity is what a person is suited to, okay, and it's making him do good, and it's making him worship God, albeit slightly corrupted way now, Allah will still reward him for all that he does because
Yeah.
of his sincerity in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your answer turns the question on its head in a way,
Mm.
because the question assumes that there's only one way to God, and that's Islam, for example. If
Correct.
that's kind of maybe the assumption, since we're Muslims, right?
Yeah.
That's the assumption that we might say that. But
Yeah.
that's the fascinating thing that I say in the beginning of every show, that
Yeah.
Islam is the most inclusive religion. It says you can
Absolutely.
go to heaven even if you're not Muslim,
Correct.
and Islam encourages you just to be the best person you can be,
Yeah.
right? Now, we're not saying stick to your atlas if you know how to use the
Exactly.
GPS,
That is
right?
a very good point. Right. If
Yeah.
you
So
got
hopefully you're
some,
understanding the metaphors, by
yeah,
the
yeah.
way.
If you have something better that you can use, then use that. Surely, it would be stupid of me to use the atlas, right, and not the sat nav, because having known how to use the sat nav will bypass me any closed roads, any diversions, any traffic jams, which the atlas won't be able to do. So it would be better for me to change to a sat nav and use the sat nav and not the atlas. But someone who doesn't know the atlas, then it is better for him to stick with the atlas. Doesn't know how to use a sat nav, it's better for him to use the atlas.
Okay, I'm not gonna repeat this guy's username. Sounds like somebody would come watch the Simpsons, as
Mm.
typical Bart Simpson joke. But anyway. Anyway, but he's so it makes an interesting point. Like, what would you say to a Buddhist? So you might be surprised
Mm.
that me and my uncle Hassan are part of, I would describe, a revolutionary group of Muslims who want to change the world with love. It's a short version called Ahmadiyya Muslims, but anyway, all promised by different religions, by the way, including the Buddha, right? So the Buddha and Jesus and Krishna all said they'll come back in the latter days. I'm not going to go into that too much, but basically we accept that all these religions that have reached the test of time. What's the phrase? Lasted the test of time, passed the
Lasted
test
the
of time.
test of time, yeah.
Something like that, right? Okay, they are actually true religions. Okay, so we believe in Buddha, and
Correct.
so the sort of answer. So what we're answering, I'm trying to remember what we were answering. We were answering this question
How
here,
would you
which
approach
is,
a Buddhist?
yeah, how would you approach a Buddhist? And I'm trying to throw it into about how do you pick the right religion, sort of thing. Is follow the rules that benefit you most. Okay, and I'll tell you something that Buddhists, I find Buddhists do, and you do watch out for this, that they hardly ever listen to the teachings of Buddha. They make up all sorts of quotes and they're not from Buddha. And I would recommend, if you don't do that, if you're not following Buddha, then maybe try a different religion where you're actually quoting the original teachings, because that's what I've noticed. Any last thoughts about
Yeah,
that?
I've got that's another one of my favorite questions, actually, about
Yeah,
other religions, always is, but Buddha particularly, because I once listened to a question answer session of the fourth caliph of the Ahmadi Muslim community, and a Buddhist actually addressed him and asked him the question that as a Buddhist, I meditate. So, what is the difference between meditation and prayer, right? And the analogy that the fourth caliph gave has stuck with me, and I want to share that with you. In paraphrase, what he said was that what meditation does for you, it empowers your body and your mind to do things which you think were not feasible for you to do. So it helps you overcome of those, right? The Islamic prayer, he said, is contains all of that. It empowers you, but it goes one step further. And he said, and he gave an analogy of a large, a huge hallway of doors made of stone, which are impossible to open. Okay, so what meditation would do would help you push those doors open against all odds. But what prayer does is that some of those doors suddenly open themselves for you, right?
because
Because
you're not limited to your own abilities,
exactly,
you're
you are reaching out
using
to a
God's
higher
abilities.
being, the God, right? And in fact, the Holy Quran, when he says that, say to the believers that I am closer to you than your jugular vein, that what that is saying is that the prayer is a special. And the next line is, so pray to me and I will come to you, right? So what this prayer is saying, or this verse of the Quran is saying, that prayer is the proof that God exists.
Yeah,
So Buddhism is a wonderful religion. However, it's an old religion, and we don't know whether it is it's in its original form or not. Whether we see Buddhism like other religions in a corrupted form, and I'm not talking negatively corrupted. I'm just saying that it's no longer what Buddha came and taught, right? But it is nevertheless a religion from God. But
yeah,
an Islamic prayer and other prayers will include meditation in it as well.
yeah.
It goes one step further.
Cool. Okay, so I'm super lazy in that I don't want to change the chapters that I've already posted in the description. So I posted this while we were still talking. But anyway, why? So this is a question I got from a guy called Bob Nordstrom. Sounds like somebody from Sweden, I think. Why do you believe in a slave trading warlord to be a prophet? And I think this phrase of warlords come from a question that I actually planned to answer because a famous guy called Jordan Peterson, a clinical psychologist, but a lot of people take his advice on YouTube. And I like a lot of what he says, right? But he said that he thought at one point that Prophet Muhammad sounded like he was a warlord because this guy Jordan Peterson and it sounds like Bob Nordstrom also have this impression. And so a brief like there's so many things we could say on this, but I'll just copy paste one thing very briefly. But there's so much more we can say on it. I'll just paste it in here. There we go. And there we go on the screen. And what should make thee know what is a steep ascent? A steep ascent, as in towards heaven, doing good things. It is the freeing of a slave. Okay, my brief answer to this question is I think there's really three questions. Was Prophet Muhammad a slave trader? Was he a warlord? And why should we believe him as a prophet anyway, at all, even if he wasn't those things, right? And so, one thing is, I'm going to briefly say he wasn't a slave trader or a warlord, just to put it out there in short. Okay, and there's so many amazing things, how many revolutions he created, did, or managed despite being such an incredibly helpless situation, not being able to read or write, in the middle of nowhere, amongst the people who are the most powerless and backward in the world, yet to completely change the world. So there's some sort of idea that he had an outside power that helped him. That's my brief answer. Any thoughts, Uncle Hassan?
Very quickly, whenever you read the Quran about slaves, it talks about freeing slaves, it talks about giving rights to slaves, it talks about marrying slaves so that they get their freedom. So, uh, if anything, Islam promotes the freeing of slaves, not the encapsulating of slaves. In fact, you will nowhere read in the Quran or in the example of the Prophet where slaves are slavery is being encouraged. It is anything but the opposite. What the criticism is that the Prophet or the Quran never says you should not have slavery. The reason for that is that uh, it talks about freeing slaves. So it talks about bringing about uh, some sort of rights to those people who didn't have them. Now, if let's say Islam said slavery is forbidden, okay, no more slavery, what would happen to all those slaves who didn't have any housing, any accommodation, any food, anything to survive on? There would be millions of slaves just left completely to the open, to their own resources with nothing there. And during those times, unless you had something with you, it would be hard to survive. So that
Hmm.
is why Islam didn't per se said abolish slavery, but it said to free slaves and give them their rights by marrying them, by giving them equalities and things like this. And slowly within Islam, slavery terminated as such.
Yeah.
And the term slavery can be understood differently because it talks about rights to them, about marrying them. This is not the slave trade of the Western thinking of what they used to do. It's a totally different
And a
concept of
certain perspective, I think there's a perspective that's needed,
mm,
that um, slaves were, and people feel kind of, I think in the West we have a sort of knee-jerk reaction without really understanding the context. Okay, you say, what
mm,
kind of context can you possibly have to support slavery, right?
yeah,
And a very brief answer is that slaves were part of a, a fundamental part of the economy at the time. So
yeah,
imagine you spend all your money on slaves, right?
mm,
Then, and you're immediately have to give them all away. Then you've got no money, you're destitute, you've got nothing, you're in big trouble, right? So you might say, oh, that's not good enough. You can't ever own a person. Well, then there's another solution that you might not have thought of, which is that, or the person asking this might not have realized, which is, as a Muslim, you had to wear the same clothes as your slave, and
correct.
you had to eat the same
Then
food as your
food,
slaves.
yeah, yeah,
So I would say, I don't want to make fun of different companies, but some companies treat people so badly that if you know this, that you can't even go toilet. You have to
mm,
wee in a bottle, right? That's employment in
yeah.
some companies,
And
right?
if you remember the Zayd, there was the freed slave, was given the option to go back to his previous owner, and he refused. He wanted to
Well,
stay with the Prophet.
to his parents.
His
So his
parents, yeah,
parents came to found him and
yeah,
said, like, your owner, as it were, Muhammad, peace be
yes.
upon him, said you're free, and he said no. You want to tell the story?
Well, no, I'm just going to say that he wanted to stay with the Prophet because of the way he was treated. So, a
Yeah.
slave who was mistreated, or the slave in the terms of the way the West world thinks of slaves, was not the slavery that was practiced in Islam at all. And he also mentions about him being a warlord, right? In a very few seconds, if I just briefly say, a warlord, if you look at what we have done when we go to Iraq, for example, the first thing we did was bombarded the bridges, the water supplies, and everything like that, right? Prophet Muhammad, 13 years he was persecuted, didn't do anything. He went to Medina, he was chased by the Meccans. He went to Badr so that the people of Mecca would not be affected by
So he
their
left
attack.
his hometown to a
He
place
left
called
his
Medina.
hometown. He left the people of Medina so that they would not be affected by the vengeance Meccans wanted on Muhammad. When Muhammad got to Badr, there was two water wells. right? And they, because they got there first, preempting this attack, they had the access to both the water wells.
So
But
the
he
enemy
allowed,
access to the water
yeah,
was, yeah, yeah.
and he gave access to the water to the Meccans while
His
there was
enemies, people have
to
been
the
persecuting
enemies,
for
so that
13
they could
years
have
before that.
water. Now, is
And
this a
these
sign of?
people, I'm sorry I interrupt
Yeah,
because only a few seconds left, but basically, just to get the story, the Meccans are people who've been killing his family and all his friends for 13 years.
yeah,
Then Prophet Muhammad leaves
yeah.
to
They
another
pursue
town
him.
and they chase him and start
Correct.
battle after battle,
Yeah,
and he only defends himself. And you can say, how did Islam spread so quickly? That's a longer story. Can't
yeah,
do that in three
yeah.
seconds.
I was going to say that, is this a
Yeah.
sign of a warlord who gives this
No.
sort of access? It's not the sign of a war. So please read your history, because these sort of questions are misleading, and they're intended to mislead people and nothing else.
Yeah. So I want to say thank you, first of all, to my uncle Asan for taking part. Really appreciate his insight. Um, really lovely stories and different ways of explaining things. Also, thank you, everybody who's been watching. You know, Peter, Khalud, Bendover,
Mm.
and other everybody who's watching. Really appreciate them. Please do press the like button. I'm not like some sort of YouTuber who just wants likes. I really don't actually care personally. It's just that I think if you press the like button, and because if you value the show and you think other people can benefit from it, if you press the like button, maybe YouTube will spread the word, as it were. So anyway, catch you next week, hopefully Thursday, 7 to 8 p.m. For more life-changing stuff. Peace be upon
Thank
you.
you for
Until
having
next
me
week.
on, Khalid. Excellent program.
You're welcome. Just stick on. I'm gonna you can have a chit chat.